Well, welcome to this week's long coffee break. Hope you've got a hot cup of coffee and ready for some exciting presentation on security credentials and understanding where they've come from and where they're going. I'm Jim Jameson, and I'm a senior account executive long building technologies with the Seattle Security Solutions team. We appreciate your attendance and taking the time to learn more about security credentials. I'm going to hand this off to Jeff Hansen, who's the Regional Electronic Access Control Campus Manager with Assa Abloy. Good morning, Jeff.
Morning, Jim. Glad to be here.
Well, I thought, Jeff, maybe we could ask you to give us a little bit of overview what security credentials really are.
So security credentials today take several form factors, right? I mean, historically, it's always been a card, a fob, maybe it was a little I button of some force to stick on. Today, it's evolved to where we're using watches, smart watches. We're using Android and iPhones. Anything is now part of that credential conversation. So the form factors are changing.
Sure. Maybe you could walk us through kind of a brief history of where credentials have been and where they're going.
Sure. And I think it's a good conversation. I think it's a good starting point because we need to understand kind of where we've been, how we got here, right? So back in the day, back in the 1980s, the magnetic stripe cards were all the rage. It was a new technology. It was replacing keys on doors, and it offered a lot of benefits. As time went on, they went to a contactless in the 90s with the Prox technology. Eventually, needs arose, and they moved into smart chips and high-frequency cards in the early 2000s. And eventually, around the 2010 mark, the mobile credentials became more popular and certainly part of the conversation because of the evolution of smartphones. They eventually got up to where the Bluetooth became predominant, and now we're seeing there's some different things on the horizon here with mobile credentials.
Well, I sure remember those swipe cards, and they get demagnetized and be so frustrated you couldn't get into the building or the room you wanted to go into, but that was a long time ago. So can you speak to any of the pitfalls that credentials would have and maybe some security risks?
Sure. We can go through at least each of the technologies kind of a high level, but mag stripes were there for a reason. They were cost effective, easy to get. They're still in use today. That's a real eye opener for some to realize that old technology that's easily skimmed or hacked, but they're still in use today because they're just so available and so cost effective. They're also used because they have a read-write capability. So for declining balances in some transactional situations, they work really well. So they're still there. Prox, another great technology, probably the most predominant credential out there today is a Prox chip, but yet it's not secure. A couple of things that we talk about with the Prox cards is, the most common Prox cards are 26-bit. And in that 26-bit form factor, you've only got just over 65,000 combinations. So with millions and tens and hundreds of millions of credentials out there, there's duplication. So if you're not using facility codes and some other things, that becomes vulnerable, along with it's just easy to clone. And We'll talk about a little more of that in a minute. Smart cards, very popular. That's where everything's kind of been most recently. And that's because you've got different sectors and multiple encryption keys. You can secure different sectors for different applications. So if you've got transactional declining balance stuff for dining or vending or whatever, they can use a different sector for each one of those. So that's a real big benefit. The NFC in mobile is really all the conversation today. NFC was around, but Apple's kept that NFC chip locked down. So everything's gone more Bluetooth. So today we have multiple manufacturers, both access control OEMs and hardware manufacturers generating their own mobile keys. But that's part of this conversation, is making sure you understand whose key is driving the credential to make sure you have compatible hardware. So, and we can get into a little more of those details as we go on.
Sure. So where do you see the next generation of credentials going, and why do you feel this is important?
Well, I think the reason it's important is because of this. I mean, you can Google that, clone my key. You'll see out in there on the internet a lot of places where we can clone things, and that's really become more and more of a relevant conversation, because we're seeing what's going on even globally and big enterprise level things being hacked, and that goes right down to their doors and their security. So it's easy today to go to a grocery store, a Lowe's, some supermarkets, and clone keys, or you can go on the internet and for $20 you can buy a cloner. So for the Prox cloners, that's $20. You'll get 5 cards and some little fobs. You can walk up to somebody and clone their card, and no one even knows it took place. So that's a big security risk. I think it's important that we are all aware of that. But as far as where we're going, I think this is it right here. You can see these are just some of the players in the space of cards and credentials. You have some of the big one-card providers that are part of the higher ed campus space, with the Seaboards, the Transacts, the TouchNets. Those are all part of the conversation. But even more so, some of these one-off OEMs with their different mobile platforms are important. Part of that also, Jim, I think that's part of the conversation, is how the ecosystems are growing. Back in the day, a card worked for a door, and that's really all we used it for. It was more of a convenience thing. But today we're seeing that people want to use the same device to remotely start their car, to get into their house with a smart lock, to control the thermostat. And when they go to the office or to work, whatever, school, they expect that same smartphone to be relevant and to use it. So that's created this ecosystem that's really spurring up. We also are seeing some of the, like the wavelengths that's listed there, they're really getting aggressive with custom elite keys. So several of these manufacturers can provide their own custom encryption key for the technology that's on that chip. So I think it's important that they understand and ask the right questions. Whose card is it? Where'd they procure the card? And what's the encryption key? Because there's so many flavors of and form factors that come into play.
So if we're going to move to some of these newer types of credentials out there, will there be modifications to their existing infrastructure to be able to utilize these things?
Yeah, so certainly there's certain things come into play. One of the big things today that we're seeing is this ultra wideband space. I mean, I know in your world, you guys are big with Linnell and S2. They've got their own Blue Diamond. HID's got their mobile. Apple's got their Play now with the Apple Wallet and Google Play or Google Pay. We're seeing this ultra wideband's a fun one to talk to, just to kind of talk about what's on the future. This is a consortium that was formed recently with HID, NXP, who are the 2 major chip manufacturers in credentials. And you can see some of the value here because it's more accurate, more reliable, low energy, all the things we want to see in a credential. It's there. And part of that also comes along with the way this thing's evolved with what they've done with the connectivity in the car industry. So it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, that ecosystem's grown so much. As far as compatibility and forward thinking, the other piece is this: we have to anticipate. If you're a security integrator, if you're an end user, you need to understand a little bit about the credential space so you're thinking forward. Sometimes the readers are compatible. We're starting to see manufacturers almost standardize on multi-class readers that have both NFC and Bluetooth capabilities, because no one really knows if this Apple thing's going to scale outside of higher ed, if it's going to grow into the enterprise healthcare space, or whether the BLE. But this ultra wideband's fascinating because it's using multiple technologies within your smartphone to determine how close you are to the door, what direction you're traveling, and then it proactively unlocks that reader so that the door's unlocked when you get to it. You don't even have to tap or present your phone or card. So as far as the compatibility, you just need to know whose credential it is and what encryption key. And then some readers will require config cards to load those keys if they're available, if they're not somebody's custom standard key that's used in multiple sites. But they're also, what we see happening is people will start with their perimeter and they'll take a phased approach. They'll take those high security doors, perimeter doors, and they'll spend the money and upgrade the readers on the perimeter. They'll use a higher security credential. Sometimes they're using a dual tech credential. And that's kind of what this card reflects. As you can see, there's multiple chips. So you can have a Prox chip and a smart chip all on the same piece of plastic, and you're using it with different readers. So you can upgrade those lower security interior doors when budget allows. And that way you're getting the security, but you're also getting the convenience of card access on those doors.
Well, it sounds like, your relationship with your security integrator is so important here to map out your future and your planning so you can take advantage of the technologies that are important to you and making sure that you have the infrastructure to utilize those. And, people like Long, all of our partners out there, we'd love to do that planning with you. And we bring in people like Jeff with Assa Abloy to help us do all that strategy planning. Well, I'm sure this is a lot of information in a short period of time, Jeff, and there's going to be a lot of questions that come up. And I'm going to ask anyone who's got any questions. The last slide will have my contact information on there, and please reach out to me and forward me any of your questions or give me a call, and I'll work with Jeff and we can get the answers to you, because guarantee you I don't know everything, because this is evolving so quickly, and there's new things every day out there. And if you can think it, it's probably possible. And that's kind of the world we live in right now. But we'd love to do the planning with you, and we'd love to get some information, because we want to make smart decisions. So when we upgrade, we're kind of future proofing ourselves instead of getting us pigeonholed to using old technology. So Jeff, I really want to say thank you so much for your time today, and I learned a lot too. There's a tremendous amount of information here, and we're going to have to part ways here and let people get back to their day. But thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, make sure you join us in our next coffee break session, and we'll have another very intriguing topic that you're going to be on the edge of your seat to learn some more. So appreciate it, and you guys all have a great day out there. And don't forget to finish your coffee.